I think there's a couple important points to be made. One is I think it behooves a leader or a commander, regardless of whether it's business, military, whatever, is to provide an atmosphere of first to be able to challenge the plan from your subordinates, from your
Mm-hmm.
staff, that it's okay to realize and to question if they see something that isn't going the way we had intended, and that's important. And sometimes leaders end up, because of their ego, wanting to drive home a plan, and it goes back to how the plan is developed. If you have too much of your personal reputation and ego invested in it, rather than a collective ownership of building that plan and a collective license to challenge and question and to keep it open and flexible and adaptable, that leads to a problem of the plan not being able to be adapted. I'd say one other point.
Mm-hmm.
In most organizations, especially large organizations, definitely the military and large corporations that I've been in, you have a strategy, you have a sort of an operational design, and you have your day-to-day tactics. And it's important to keep those aligned. Sometimes you may be more adaptive at the operational and tactical level because you're facing it every day, and you're not going back and looking at how it impacts your longer term strategic goals and objectives. So you aren't adapting at one level where you may be at another level. Then you get out of alignment, and that will create problems. It means your vision, your goals, and all, you're not looking for the chances to change those, either because they've become irrelevant or challenged, or because there was an opportunity you didn't take advantage of because you didn't see, but it was seen at a lower level. So those things have to constantly be viewed in conjunction with each other to make sure your day-to-day operations are in sync with your strategy, and making sure your strategy isn't just designed, put on a shelf, but it has to be a living kind of understanding in how you're going to achieve your vision.
Yes, sir. That first component, creating the environment where you can receive inputs from those you're leading and others, so critical. And then your idea, just with regard to being able to look at the landscape and not be rigidly, I'm trying to think of the term with regards to plants where they just are adherent, let's say, to the ground and the rock that they're on. But that sort of mental picture where you're just locked in and you can't let go of it, to your own detriment. And so we've seen that over and over. I know you've heard this a million times, I'm sure, but it reminds me of General Colin Powell's admonition, don't tie your position to your ego. And it reminds me of countless historical examples where leaders failed spectacularly because they did fall in love with their plan or tied it to their ego. We could cite all sorts from a military context. We could talk about Napoleon's terrible march into Russia in the winter that was repeated by Germany also. Or we could talk about Blockbuster sticking with VHS tapes when the digital landscape was unfolding. But one that jumped to my mind was the story of Kodak. Kodak dominated film-based photography, but what many listeners may not actually know is they invented and patented the first digital camera, but they were so committed, their plan was so committed to film, they refused to move toward digital photography. And so as a result, the company that was the name, the face of photography in the world, collapsed in the 1980s and 90s and then went bankrupt in 2012 after losing $30 billion. Now, if we contrast that with a different story that is told with reverence throughout the Silicon Valley, that's the story of Intel. And so Intel was originally a memory chip company. That was their plan. That was what they did. That was all they did. It was who they were as a company, as an entity. But the memory chip business started to really slow down, and things weren't looking so good. And so as they began watching things slow at Intel, the co-founders, Andy Grove and Gordon Moore, were facing effectively an existential crisis of their corporation. And so one day, Grove and Moore were in Grove's office, and Andy Grove posed a question. He said, if we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think he would do? And unhesitatingly, Gordon Moore said he would get us out of memories. That is, Moore really thought the new CEO would leave Intel's identity as memory chip company and would shift to the new and growing field of microprocessors. And so Andy Grove responded and said, why shouldn't you and I walk out the door, come back in, and do it ourselves? And with that decision, Intel went on to become what we know of Intel, all because they were able to move away from their plan to a better one.